She sat in the dark, singing to an empty cradle. Her voice was soft, but full of pain. Long ago, her baby was taken from her. The rulers told her the child was gone forever. Yet every night, she sang the same lullaby, hoping the stars would carry her voice to her daughter. But on this night, something changed. She heard footsteps outside. A shadow moved closer. Her heart raced. Was it another guard come to silence her, or was it something else? And then, the door creaked open. A human stepped inside. In his arms, he carried something wrapped in cloth. And for the first time in years, the mother's song stopped because hope had returned to her heart. The room was quiet, too quiet for a place that once held the laughter of a child. A single cradle stood near the window, rocking slightly as if touched by the breeze. Beside it sat a mother, her eyes heavy with sadness. She sang in a low, trembling voice, a song that was once filled with joy but now carried only sorrow. Each note seemed to float in the air, vanish, and return to her like an echo of loss. She had sung this lullaby every night since the day her baby was taken from her. They told her the child was gone forever. They told her there was no hope. But the mother refused to stop, even if no little ears were there to hear her. She sang as if her child could still feel her voice through the stars. Her hands rested on the edge of the empty cradle. She remembered the tiny fingers that once wrapped around hers, the soft warmth she used to hold close to her chest. Now the cradle was silent, only carrying her memories. Sometimes she thought she heard her baby's cry in the night, but when she looked, the cradle was always empty. The neighbors often whispered about her. Some called her broken, others said she had lost her mind. But she did not care. Her world had ended the moment her child was taken away, and the only thing left to her was the song. She believed that if she kept singing, somehow, some way, her baby would hear her across the distance. The night outside was calm, but the mother's heart was restless. A feeling stirred inside her, one she could not explain. She lifted her head and glanced at the window. The moonlight spilled across the floor, but in the shadows near her door, she thought she saw movement. Her breath caught in her throat. She told herself it was only the wind, only her tired mind playing tricks. Yet the sound of footsteps reached her ears, slow and steady. She froze, her lullaby fading into silence. No one visited her at this hour. No one cared to step into her lonely house. Still, the steps came closer. Her hands shook as she stood from the cradle. She whispered to herself that it was nothing, but her heart beat faster and faster. The door gave a soft creak, as if someone was standing just beyond it. She wanted to call out, but her voice would not come. The door opened. A figure stepped inside. It was not one of her kind. It was taller, broader, and his face was strange yet calm. He was human, a being rarely seen in her world. She did not understand why one would come here, to her lonely home, in the middle of the night. The human did not speak right away. His eyes looked around the room, then slowly fell upon the empty cradle. His expression softened, almost as if he understood the pain it carried. In his arms, he held something wrapped in cloth, close to his chest. The mother's eyes locked on the bundle. Her breath grew heavy. A wild thought rose inside her heart, a hope she had buried long ago. Could it be? No, she dared not believe. Hope had broken her too many times before. Yet she could not look away. The human stepped forward, carefully, as though he did not wish to frighten her. The room felt smaller now, filled with a silence that spoke louder than words. The mother wanted to demand answers, but her voice trembled too much to speak. For years, she had lived with nothing but sorrow and memory. For years, she had sung to a cradle that never answered back. And now, before her, stood a stranger holding something that made her heart beat with both fear and longing. The lullaby she had sung only moments ago still lingered in the air, and for the first time, she wondered if it had been heard. The human's eyes seemed to carry a truth he had not yet spoken. The cloth in his arms shifted slightly, and the mother's heart nearly stopped. Her world was about to change, but she did not yet know if it was a dream or reality. She stood frozen, her eyes locked on the stranger, waiting, trembling, unable to take even a single step forward. The empty cradle behind her swayed gently in the moonlight. Her song had ended, but something greater was beginning. The human stood in the doorway for a long moment, the silence stretching between him and the mother. His face showed no threat, but she still could not move. Her heart wanted to ask, her lips wanted to speak, but fear and hope mixed inside her, making her body weak. The human shifted slightly, adjusting the bundle in his arms. The cloth moved, and she thought she heard the faintest sound. So soft it could have been her imagination. Her eyes filled with tears. She had been tricked before by her own mind, hearing sounds that weren't real, seeing shapes that were only shadows. She told herself not to believe, not to fall into the same pain again. Still, her gaze remained fixed on what he carried. At last, the human spoke. His voice was calm, gentle, and steady, though strange in the way it shaped her language. He said he had traveled far to reach this place, and that what he carried was not meant for anyone else but her. The mother's heart beat faster, every word striking her with both fear and longing. She asked him who he was, though her voice was low and unsteady. The human did not answer with his name. Instead, he looked at the cradle behind her, then back at her eyes. He said he knew what she had lost. He said the rulers told her the child was gone forever, but he had seen the truth with his own eyes. The mother stepped back, shaking her head. No one could speak of her baby like this, not after all the years she had been told to forget. She whispered that her child was lost, that nothing could bring her back. But the human only shook his head slowly. He said not everything she had been told was true. Her legs felt weak, and she almost stumbled against the cradle. She wanted to believe him, but the risk of hope was too great. She asked why a human, of all beings, would come here with such words. What did he know of her pain, her sleepless nights, her endless songs to the stars? The human did not answer with promises. He did not try to comfort her with empty words. Instead, he reached into the cloth and pulled out something small. It was not the child, not yet, but an object something the mother recognized instantly. A tiny bracelet, woven from silver threads, with a small charm that glowed faintly in the moonlight. Her breath caught. That bracelet had been around her baby's wrist the day she was taken. She remembered tying it with her own hands. No one else could have it. No one else could know about it. Tears streamed down her face before she could stop them. Her knees grew weak, and she held onto the cradle for support. The human placed the bracelet in her trembling hands. He said he had found it where no one was supposed to look, hidden away by those who feared the truth. He told her there was more, far more, but first she had to trust him. The mother looked at the bracelet again and again, afraid it would vanish if she blinked. Every memory rushed back to her: the tiny wrist, the first cry, the first smile. She felt the warmth of her child as if it were only yesterday. And now, after all this time, proof rested in her hands. She asked him where her daughter was. Her voice cracked, breaking with both fear and hope. The human did not answer at once. His eyes grew heavy, as if carrying a weight too great to bear. He said her daughter lived, but she was not safe. The rulers had hidden her away, claiming it was for protection, but in truth they wanted control. The mother's chest rose and fell quickly. The room seemed to spin. Her lullaby, her endless nights, her prayers, they had not been wasted. Her child was alive. Yet, with that hope came a new fear. If her daughter lived, why had she not been returned to her? What dangers surrounded her now? The human stepped closer, placing the bundle on the cradle. The mother's hands shook as she reached toward it, but the human lifted his hand gently, asking her to wait. He said the journey was not finished yet. He could not place the child in her arms tonight, not here, not yet. But he promised that what she longed for was no longer impossible. Her tears fell freely. The empty cradle no longer looked the same. For years it had been a symbol of loss, but now it carried a sign of hope. She clutched the bracelet against her heart, her body trembling. The human stood in silence, letting her grieve, letting her believe. The air in the room was thick with unspoken words. She wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but only one truly mattered. Would she ever hold her daughter again? The human's eyes softened as if he had heard the question inside her heart. He whispered that the time was coming, but the path would not be easy. For now, all she needed was courage, because the truth was far greater than she could imagine. Her lullaby returned to her lips, not of sorrow this time, but of hope. The human listened quietly, the sound filling the room. For the first time in years, the cradle did not feel empty. The night stretched long. Yet the mother did not sleep. She sat close to the cradle, the small bracelet resting in her hands. Her fingers traced its silver threads again and again, as if afraid it might vanish if she looked away. The human sat across the room, quiet, watching the stars through the window. Neither spoke for a time, but the silence was no longer heavy. It carried something different now, something almost alive. At last, the mother found her voice. She asked him how he had this bracelet, how he came to know of her child. Her words were gentle but filled with need. The human turned toward her, his eyes steady, though a shadow of burden rested in them. He explained that he had once walked through places she could never reach, hidden halls and secret chambers where whispers were never meant to escape. He told her he had seen the ruler's lies with his own eyes, lies built to bury hope. Her chest tightened as she listened. She had always known there was more behind their words, but to hear it from someone who had stood within those forbidden walls made her tremble. She asked him what he meant, why her daughter was taken, why her lullabies had been silenced by fear. The human did not rush. He spoke with care, as if each word held weight. He said her daughter was not gone, but she was not free either. He told her that the rulers believed the child carried something rare, something they did not understand. They chose to hide her away, calling it protection, though the truth was control. The mother pressed her hand against her heart. The thought of her little one living far away, kept apart, broke her again, yet also lifted her. For the first time, she could picture her child breathing, growing, waiting. Her tears returned, but these were not the same tears she had shed all these years. These were tears of longing mixed with light. She whispered to him that she wanted to see her daughter, no matter the cost. Her voice shook, but her spirit stood strong. The human watched her closely, then nodded, as though he had been waiting for her to say those words. He told her the path would not be simple. The rulers did not want the truth uncovered. They built walls of silence around the child, and anyone who tried to look too closely was pushed aside. But he said he had come too far to step back now, and that he had not crossed the stars to leave her in sorrow. The mother looked into his eyes, searching for falsehood. But what she saw was something she had not seen in many years: honesty without fear. She asked him why he would care for a child that was not his, for a mother who was not his kind. The human lowered his gaze for a moment before answering. He said he had once known loss himself, that he understood the emptiness of absence. He could not heal his own wounds, but perhaps he could help hers. His voice was quiet, yet it filled the room with truth. The mother felt her heart stir. She still did not fully understand him, but she no longer questioned his purpose. She only knew she needed him, for he carried the one thing she had sought all these years: proof that her daughter lived. The human reached into his coat and revealed a second object, folded and worn. It was a small piece of cloth, the very blanket she had wrapped her baby in the first night after birth. She gasped, her hand covering her mouth. She remembered every thread, every mark. She pressed it to her face, breathing in memories. Her lullaby rose again, this time without thought. The song flowed freely, no longer broken, but full of longing and promise. The human listened in silence, letting the melody carry through the night. When her voice faded, he stood and spoke of what must come next. He said she could not remain here, waiting in shadows. If she truly wished to hold her daughter again, she would need to walk with him beyond the borders of her world. It would be a journey filled with uncertainty, but at its end lay the truth. Her hands tightened on the blanket. She thought of her neighbors who had called her broken, of the rulers who told her to forget, of the lonely nights beside the empty cradle. She thought of her daughter's eyes, the way they shone the first time they opened, and she knew there was no choice left to make. She lifted her head and told the human she would follow. Her voice did not tremble this time. The human gave a single nod, as if he had expected her answer all along. The stars outside burned brighter, as if listening. The cradle rocked softly in the moonlight, no longer a place of silence, but a promise of what was to come. The mother wiped her tears and stood taller than she had in years. The journey had not begun, but her heart already felt different. For the first time since her daughter was taken, she no longer felt alone. The morning light touched the small house, painting the walls in soft gold. The mother stood by the cradle, her hands resting on its wooden edge. For years, the cradle had been her prison of grief, but now it felt like a door waiting to be opened. The bracelet lay near her heart, the blanket folded gently in her arms. She looked at them again and again, as if drawing strength from their presence. The human waited by the doorway, quiet and patient. His eyes carried a steady calm, though she could sense the weight behind them. He spoke softly, reminding her that the time had come to leave. His words were not commands but an invitation, a promise that the path ahead, however uncertain, would lead her closer to her daughter. Her legs trembled as she stepped away from the cradle. She whispered a farewell to the room that had held her pain for so long. She let her hand brush over the cradle one final time, not with sorrow but with hope. Then she turned and followed the human outside. That the world beyond her door felt larger than ever. The streets stretched endlessly, filled with faces that looked at her with little interest, unaware of the storm inside her. The human walked at her side, guiding her without rushing. He moved with quiet purpose, his presence steady, as if nothing could shake him. They walked through narrow alleys where shadows clung to the walls and through marketplaces, where voices rose and fell in constant rhythm. The mother kept close to him, feeling both fear and courage growing within her. She noticed how some eyes lingered on the human, their stares filled with curiosity or quiet unease. Humans were rare in this place, and his presence did not go unnoticed. As they moved farther from her home, the human began to speak more. He told her of hidden places where secrets were locked away, of paths watched by those who wished silence to remain. He explained that reaching her daughter would mean crossing lands she had never seen, and trusting in people she had never met. Yet his voice was calm, his words careful, never promising ease but always offering truth. The mother listened closely, clutching the blanket in her hands. Each word added to the weight in her chest, yet none of it weakened her resolve. She told him that no distance, no shadow, could turn her away now. She had waited too long. The human gave her a small nod, and for the first time, a faint smile touched his face. Brief but real, the sun climbed higher, and their steps carried them beyond the heart of the city. Here, the paths grew quieter, the air cooler, filled with the scent of unfamiliar trees. The mother glanced back once, seeing the rooftops of her world fading into the distance. A strange feeling filled her, a mixture of fear and freedom. As they walked, the human shared more of what he had seen. He spoke of her daughter not as a story, but as someone real, living, breathing. He described how the child's laughter had surprised even those who wished her hidden, how her small hands reached out for light, how she carried a strength they did not expect. Every word pierced the mother's heart, but it was a sweet pain, one that gave her steps new energy. At times, they paused to rest beneath the shade of tall trees or beside quiet streams. In those moments, the mother sang softly, not to an empty cradle this time, but to the open air, as if her voice could fly across the distance and reach her daughter's ears. The human listened in silence, his eyes thoughtful, his posture calm. The journey was not without unease. More than once, the mother felt eyes upon them, unseen but present. She asked the human about it, but he only said that the truth always drew attention, and not everyone wished for it to be uncovered. His tone held no fear, but it made her heart beat faster. Night fell as they reached the edge of the forest. The stars stretched wide above them, brighter than she had ever seen. The human built a small light to guide them, simple and warm. They sat close to it, and the silence between them was no longer heavy, but almost comforting. The mother spoke of her daughter then, sharing memories of her first days, her first smile, the way her tiny fingers had curled around hers. Her voice was soft, but her eyes shone with a strength she had forgotten she carried. The human listened with care, as if each word mattered. He told her that the journey would grow harder from here, that the places ahead were full of watchful eyes, but he also said that she was not alone anymore, and that together they carried something stronger than fear. She looked at him, the blanket pressed to her chest, and for the first time in years, she felt steady. The road stretched ahead into the unknown, but with each step, she was moving closer to the one thing her soul longed for. The night was still, but in her heart, there was a quiet fire. She was no longer just a mother of loss. She was a mother in search, and she would not stop until the cradle was filled again. *. The night was quiet, but inside her heart the silence was loud. She sat by the fire, her hands gently brushing over her daughter's soft hair as if to remind herself that the child was real, breathing, and safe. The human who had returned the girl to her arms watched from a short distance, his expression unreadable but his presence steady. It was not only a child he had returned, it was her reason to live again. She glanced at him, wanting to ask the question that lingered in her heart. How did you do it? Why would you help me? But her voice caught in her throat, afraid that speaking might shatter the fragile moment. Instead, she simply held her daughter closer, while the human gave her a small nod. As though he understood without words, days passed, and life began to take shape again. The child laughed, played, and filled the once empty home with light. Yet, beneath the warmth of this new beginning, there was an unease that neither the woman nor the human could ignore. There were whispers in the town, shadows at the edge of the forest, and signs that someone or something was watching. She noticed small things, the door left slightly open when she was sure she had closed it, the sound of movement at night when all should have been still. The human noticed too, his eyes always scanning the distance, his hand never far from the few tools he carried. One evening, as the child played with a simple toy, the woman whispered, "It feels like they are waiting." But for what? The human's jaw tightened, and he answered softly, "Not for what, for who." His words sent a shiver through her, because she knew he was right. Her daughter's return was a miracle, but miracles often came with a price. She began to see how the human kept himself awake at night, guarding the house, listening to every sound. He had not told her everything, and she sensed that his silence was to protect her. Still, she wondered if the danger was closer than she dared to imagine. The child, innocent and unaware, asked the human questions that made him smile. She tugged at his sleeve and said, "Will you stay with us always?" His smile faded for a moment before he replied, "As long as you need me." The woman heard this, and though her heart was grateful, it was also heavy. She realized he was preparing for something she could not yet see. That night, the human finally spoke. Sitting by the fire, his voice low but firm, he said, "Your daughter is not only important to you. Others know what she means, and they will come. That is why I must be here. That is why you must be ready." Her hands tightened around her child, fear gripping her chest, but also determination rising within her. The cradle was no longer empty. Her arms were no longer alone. And yet, the peace she had waited for all her life was fragile, like glass that could break with one wrong step. She looked at the human and knew their journey was not ending. It was only beginning. The night stretched long, filled with silence that was almost too heavy to bear. The woman sat near her daughter's bed, listening to the steady rhythm of the child's breathing. It was a sound she thought she would never hear again, a sound that now meant everything to her. The human sat close by, his eyes fixed on the window, as though he was waiting for something he already knew would come. She wanted to ask him again how he had found her daughter, how he had carried her safely back into her arms, but she understood now that some truths were not easy to share. Perhaps his silence was not to hide the truth, but to protect it. Still, in her heart, she felt the weight of a secret that belonged to both of them. As dawn began to break, the world outside seemed calm, painted in soft colors of light. Yet within, a quiet tension lingered. The human finally spoke, his voice steady and gentle. "Your daughter was never lost to me," he said. "I knew where she was, but I also knew why she was taken." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The woman's breath caught. She clutched her daughter's small hand, afraid to hear more, yet needing to. The human continued, "She is special, not only to you, but to others who would not see her as a child, but as something else. I could not allow that. That is why I brought her back." The woman's eyes filled with tears, not of fear this time, but of understanding. She realized the human had carried more than her child. He had carried the burden of truth, of danger, and of choice. He had stood against what others believed, and he had chosen her daughter's life over everything else. The little girl stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She smiled at her mother, then at the human, her laughter bright and light, as if the darkness had never touched her. That sound filled the room, washing away the heaviness of the night. The woman looked at the human and whispered, "You gave her back to me. But you also gave me hope." The human shook his head slightly, a faint smile touching his lips. "No," he replied softly. "It was your hope that brought her back. I only followed it." In that moment, she understood. The cradle that once sat empty now held not only her child, but also a future, fragile yet alive. The human had not only returned her daughter, he had returned her strength, her reason to keep going, her faith that even in the darkest of times, light could find a way back. The sun rose higher, filling the room with warmth. The danger was not gone, and the path ahead would not be easy. But together they had created something that no fear could break. The woman held her daughter close, her eyes meeting the human's, and for the first time in a long time, she believed in tomorrow.